How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the second episode of the SeeThroughPanel podcast, focused on anything comics, graphic novels, or sequential art. In this episode, we're going to keep it brief. We're just going to discuss, it looks like our six recommendations apiece for your quarantine reading. My name is Cole Harvey. I will not give much of a spoiler warning in this one because I don't really think we're going to spoil the books. More just want to get you to read the books. So that would be the opposite of our plan here. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, it's Fahed Rahman, co-host of this podcast, and I'll also be reading out some of the choices for reading in isolation that I've made.
All right, so I guess I'll just get started. We kind of broke this up a little bit into genre, so if we have a matching genre, we're going to try and fit it in, but we just kind of did our own thing. Maybe get some stuff the other hasn't read. So I'll open with a sci-fi kind of dystopian adventure romance, which is a lot of stuff. But it's called The New World. It's by Alesh Kote, not sure, and Tradd Moore, who a lot of you might know from the recent Silver Surfer Marvel thing he did, Silver Surfer Black. But this is a story about a criminal, a hacker guy who basically bumps into and falls in love with the most kind of popular police officer in this city, and a lot of hijinks ensue. The art is just eye-popping, and I would say just visually you should check this out. If you've ever seen Tradd Moore before, the colors are insane, and there's a ridiculous amount of lines on the page. So that's mine.
My first choice is a fantasy adventure book. It's Bone by Jeff Smith. I'm not too sure how long the lockdown's going to last, but you should be able to get through at least 2 or 3 of the trade paperbacks. They're in black and white, and it tells the story of the 3 cousins Bone as they venture into kind of this fantasy adventure village setting, and it's beautifully told and beautifully drawn, and it's one of the best fantasy adventure series I think that's ever been committed to graphic novel format.
I think a lot of people would definitely agree with that. It's also a really good all ages book, so if you're locked in with your family for another month, hopefully not, it's really good to read to kids, nieces, nephews, and stuff like that.
Yeah, and for me at the moment, I'm trying to find books that perhaps are a little bit less gritty and offer a bit more escapism. So quite a few of my choices kind of reflect that. You just disappear into the Boneville universe and kind of forget about kind of what's happening in the rest of the outside world.
Oh yeah, I have mostly a similar list in that sense, except for one, which I will get to soon, that completely is the opposite of that. For my adventure comic, I decided to go with, it's also my only superhero comic, Batman Universe by Brian Michael Bendis and art by Nick Derington. I just read this yesterday, actually, and in terms of superhero comics, it's like the most superhero comic you can get. There's like all the DC characters, dinosaurs, ninjas, they go to space, ninjas with jetpacks, just crazy stuff. And the art by Nick Derington is like, just imagine Frank Whiteley, but cartoony kind of.
Oh, interesting.
It's very good. The color work is awesome too, and it's just kind of like four color superhero comics. It's really fun, and for a guy like me that's kind of burnt out on standard superhero stuff, it was just conventional, like the most straightforward fun. It was very easy to read, I guess.
Okay, so my next choice is also a superhero graphic novel, and I'm recommending any of the Astro City trade paperbacks that are written by Kurt Busiek. I would say maybe the first one is, I mean, it's still a great graphic novel, but maybe skip the first one because it's a little bit of world setting. But any of the other ones are absolutely kind of top tier superhero storytelling, and the beauty about it is because each of the paperbacks are self-contained stories. You don't need to read the one before or the one after. You're getting a whole story in one trade paperback, and you're not going to feel kind of like out of depth with perhaps some of these other superhero trade paperbacks where you're missing out on masses of
Oh yeah, it doesn't have all the baggage. You don't have to go read like Superman from the 80s to read this, which is nice.
Yeah.
On for my next one, I'm gonna go with a comedy fantasy kind of mashup. This is Orc Stain by James Stokoe, but I could just as easily recommend Wonton Soup or Aliens Dead Orbit or anything James Stokoe has done, because he's an absolute monster on the page. He does these literally gigantic pages. He draws them original size. They're gigantic. And there's lines all over, and it's just a visual treat. I can't describe it at all. It would do no justice. And the story is just insane. It's a world of orcs, and, you know, I really would sound insane if I tried to go into the plot here, but just take my word for it. You won't understand a lot of it that's going on, but it's very funny, and it kind of left me in awe of how imaginative this guy was, just because of the work he was doing both as the writer and artist. It was amazing.
Usually when you've got artists that do these massive panoramic panels, it can occasionally be kind of difficult to follow and seeming sometimes a little bit self-indulgent, but James Stokoe is, you know, as you said, an absolute monster on the page, and it's just so engrossing when you see especially some of his action set pieces, and his world building, especially in Orc Stain, is very original and very, very funny, and it's if I remember correctly, so it was a little bit violent as well. So maybe
it's a bit violent, yes.
Yeah, to keep it out of the younger members of your family, if you are self-isolating.
I would say younger mature readers on that one. They use a very sensitive part of the male body as currency, I'll say.
Yes. Yeah.
So,
talking about a romance, we're talking about sensitive parts of the male body. The next one is to do with is a romance, and I'm choosing Blossoms in Autumn. The artist is Zidrou, and the author, my apologies for pronunciation, is Aimée de Jongh, I believe is how it's pronounced, and it's just a really kind of lovely, heartwarming tale of these two people meeting and falling in love later in life, and it's just like a warm, lovely, warm hug. It's very, very nice story about two older people meeting later in life and falling in love. So that's I really have to say about that one.
That does sound really nice. That's the kind of stuff I've been trying to read lately. In this weird time, you don't really want to be reading the blood and guts stuff. I'm definitely gonna mark that down. So, man, I have to follow up with something real personal. So I'll do Glenn Ganges in the River at Night by Kevin Huizenga. It's Hui, so I think it's Kevin Huizenga. This is a book about a guy named Glenn Ganges, obviously, who drank too much coffee. He drank a whole pot of coffee before bed, and he can't sleep. And it's about, I would just guess, like 100-some pages, 150-odd pages, about this guy who can't sleep, which sounds horribly boring, but it is a really detailed look into the human psyche, and there's all these deep thoughts swirling around him while he's trying to go to bed, so he goes and does other stuff, but it doesn't work. It's actually also very funny. The art is just the most simple lines, kind of cartoon style, very spare, but it does the job, and I mean, it does end up being beautiful in its own right, just the way he works the colors and kind of fits the almost very psychedelic at times story into the art, because it is a writer-artist kind of situation.
That's I'm looking at the art now. It looks very interesting. I might check that out.
it doesn't want to. You don't want to read it immediately when you hear what it's about or anything. I don't think. But when I read it, I read it all in one sitting. It was so engaging.
The next one, again, for me, we'll kind of keep with maybe a little bit of a lighter theme, is Pyongyang by Guy Delisle. It's a travel log about his adventures in Pyongyang. Guy is a animator by trade, and he went to Pyongyang to supervise North Korean animators for I think a French TV show that he was working on. And it's kind of a fish out of water, slightly comedic, slightly kind of, it gives an insight into the world of kind of the Republic of North Korea with this slightly humorous edge, I would say. So that's kind of my next choice. Again, I love Guy's art. It's very simple, but it kind of gets across the point quite well as well.
I have not read anything from him yet, but as I told you earlier, ever since you mentioned his name in the last podcast, I have been looking into him. He's going to be on my shelf here soon.
Yes.
Next up, I'll go with, I'd say, my last nice one before we get to my last pick here. This is, well, it's not nice. It's an adaptation of the War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells, very obviously well known, by Ian Edginton writing and D'Israeli on art. It's just a straightforward adaptation of the original work. There is minor differences, and I'd say the main draw in this is the art of D'Israeli. But what I recommended this for is because it goes into another book called Scarlet Traces, which is kind of what would happen if it was present day and War of the Worlds did in fact happen and we were left with this Martian technology. What would the future look like? And so D'Israeli's art is kind of this insane, cartoony but realistic. I have no idea how to describe it. Art that I've never really seen a lot like it, so it's hard for me. But the story is just a really cool concept, and I won't say it's a super feel-good book, but it's a super interesting book, and it doesn't really have a tone like a lot of other books I own. So that's kind of why I went with it.
Yes. So I've got three choices left. I'm going to kind of bundle two of them together. So these are my two kind of non-fiction, heavy non-fiction choices. So if you're looking to expand your mind a little bit and maybe read something a little bit heavier, the first is Logicomix, Epic Search for the Truth, and it's by three Greek creators. So it's Apostolos, Doxiadis, Christos, Papadimitriou, and the artist is Alecos, Papadatos. And it's basically the history of logic, and kind of starting from ancient Greece, all the way to kind of modern day philosophy and maths. And it's, part kind of teaching you to understand mathematical concept, part history book, part kind of sociological, political discussion about how these concepts in maths are sometimes misused by the people in power. Really, really good. It'll make you feel a lot smarter after you've read it. And then my second choice is Supercrash by Darryl Cunningham, and that is a look at why the financial crash happened, and not just kind of what the mechanics of it was, but also looking into the history and the philosophy of the main players that have caused and allowed this massive financial disaster to take place as well. So those are my two kind of heavier non-fiction reads.
Man, I'm glad you got those, because I had nothing that intellectual to offer. Wow, I need to get on that. That's a genre that I haven't really delved into, but I need to get in that. I think my last one is less of, I'll cheat a little bit like you cheated. I'm just gonna go with a general artist. It's definitely not feel good. This is manga and it's horror, like gross body horror. I recommend Junji Ito.
Oh, dude. Okay, yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you made it this far through all the recommendations, maybe you don't want something nice. Maybe you just want to just be horrified. And this stuff is gross. Like everything he does is gross. I own almost every book by him. Yeah, it's bad. I hope you're not looking at the pictures now. I'm not even going to open one of these books. It's amazing. Like his detail is so intricate, but you don't even want to look at it at all. You just want to turn the page, which I assume is why these go so fast when I read them, because I think I've read all of his books in one sitting, like individually, obviously, but he's
I've not read any of his work, but I was at a exhibition last year, and they did kind of a whole kind of exhibition on manga, and some of his artwork was on display, and it's really disturbing. It's really kind of it's like, that's maybe not for me. Actually,
I couldn't read it when I first got into comics. I saw it, everyone was recommending it, and I was like, I'm not going to read that. And then I read some horror for a while, and I was like, okay, maybe I can do this. No, but eventually I could look at the damn thing.
Yeah. So my last choice is Essex County by Jeff Lemire, and it is, I would describe it as the great American novel in graphic novel form.
Wow.
It's I think maybe one of the best graphic novels I've ever read. It is, and I don't say this lightly. It's a masterpiece. It's to sweep it. I can't really get into too much of the description of it without doing some spoilers, but it's essentially about it's a family saga. Let's put it kind of that way, and it takes twists and turns that are unexpected. So definitely, if you've got the time to track that down, that's definitely one to read as well during the lockdown period.
I actually haven't read Essex County. I've only read one Jeff Lemire writer-artist book, and that's Royal City.
You know what? That's the one I haven't read.
Yeah, he's got the watercolors going, I assume, in all of his books. He looks like that.
Essex County is the copy that I had was, if I remember correctly, black and white, and his ink work is very kind of jagged, and the characters are ugly, but they're so full of emotion. It's not the prettiest book to look at, and if I've got one kind of criticism of his art, sometimes some of his characters can look a little bit sameish and similar, but it's beautifully told. It's a beautifully told book. Yeah,
I didn't expect that. I'm used to his he paints, I believe. Now he does like watercolor type work, and his more recent stuff. I mean, he's more of a writer now, but it's very interesting. Well, that's all the stuff I had, I believe.
Me as well.
Thank you very much for your recommendations. I'm definitely going to be, when I edit this, I'm going to be putting all those in a list and just reading them all. So maybe you avoid Junji Ito.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, it's good art, but maybe not one to read last thing. I do a lot of my reading last thing at night before I go to bed. So I don't really need those images.
It's not for that. No.
We'll put all the full titles and spellings of the authors in the episode description when it's released. Yep. So yeah,
I'll probably also put links, if I could find them, to Amazon and Comixology respectively, just like I did for Springtime, just so people can get to them easier if they want to buy them.
But please try and buy from your local comic book shops. They do need the help. If you can, if you've got one in your area. I don't have one in my area, unfortunately, but it's kind of do buy locally if you can.
Mine is not open, but they will get you your books. They'll send you stuff. Just all you got to do is call them. Just you can help them. You can still buy from them. You might not know it, but you can still buy from them. All right. Well, thanks a lot for your time, man. It was really fun.
Cheers, dude. Have a good one. Stay indoors, guys. Stay indoors.
Stay indoors. Thanks for listening, guys.
Thanks.